9:10 on a rainy Wednesday morning, Big 550 KTRS. Tonight, there is a panel discussion at the History Museum. It's put on by a group called Meet Me St. Louis, and the host and the moderator is Lisa Bloom, NBC News analyst and author. Good morning, Lisa Bloom.
Good morning.
Tell us about the panel discussion tonight. Who's coming? Who's there? What's going on?
Well, it's at 5:30, and it's at the History Museum, and it's free, so you can't beat the price.
Okay.
And I'm going to be there, and I'm going to be speaking and moderating. I'm talking about my book, which is called Suspicion Nation, the inside story of the Trayvon Martin injustice and why we continue to repeat it. So it's a panel discussion about race relations in St. Louis in the aftermath of Ferguson, and the purpose is to open up dialogue and encourage involvement and offer action steps to help our community. Joining me in the discussion is Karen Aresti. She's the regional director of the Anti-Defamation League. Anthony Gray, who is an attorney for the family of Michael Brown. Raul Reyes, who's a lawyer, journalist, and commentator for a lot of networks like CNN. And Steve Runge, who's the chief of police for the city of Charlotte.
Charlotte, which has come under some criticism in recent months for one of the complaints that protesters have is that they're being ticketed out of existence.
Yeah,
Charlotte is one of those towns. Mm-hmm. And if you give me a moment, actually, I didn't know he was going to be on the panel, but if you give me a second, I can tell you the numbers from Charlotte here.
Yeah.
In which, let me see here. Charlotte has 1,300 residents, and they wrote 3,500 tickets.
Wow. So how can anybody support that? That's insane.
That's exactly right.
Right.
So...
it's just a way of raising money instead of taxes. Right. They're just ticketing everyone and annoying the heck out of everyone.
So you have the police chief of Charlotte.
That's right.
There to talk about this.
Steve Runge, that's right.
Do you have anybody there who is promoting or supporting the St. Louis County point of view, the St. Louis County Police point of view, or the St. Louis City Police point of view?
Well, I think Steve Runge may be doing that. He's not an official in St. Louis. But
right.
I think he's presenting that point of view.
Gotcha. Okay. Is it possible to have a legitimate, open, and honest and frank discussion in St. Louis this close to all of this toxic news that has come out?
I think it has to be possible. I think it's important for us all to come together and to solve the problems. You know, my book is called Suspicion Nation. My book came out in February, before the events that happened here in the last few months, because this is a nationwide problem. I'm from Los Angeles. I spent a lot of time in New York. You know, the Trayvon Martin case was, of course, in Florida. But to me, this is a nationwide problem, and we have to come together as a people to solve the problem of too many police shootings of unarmed African Americans, the racial problems that continue to vex us, but we can. The good news is that we can solve this problem. There are pilot programs in some cities that are actually working that reduce police shootings, and I think that's something that we can all support.
Police brutality. Well, first of all, I don't think you can.
You're cynical.
I'm very cynical, and very angry, and very upset. Personally, I go on CNN and called every racial insensitive name in the book because I dare to have a point of view different from somebody who's ranting and raving and screaming and yelling in a protest.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't think that's helpful. You know, Martin Luther King said you have little morally... hear me out.
Yeah.
You have little morally persuasive authority with those who can sense your underlying contempt.
Interesting. Because I invoked Martin Luther King over the weekend and was told that I have no moral authority to even quote Martin Luther King. As a matter of fact, on Twitter, just moments ago, I noticed somebody, a nameless, faceless person out there, but it's out there, right? Yeah. Said, I can't believe I'm listening to McGraw-Milhaven. I'm going to have Lisa Bloom. The only reason why I'm listening is because I want to have Lisa Bloom. I want to listen to her and see if she can dismantle his not-so-veiled racism. If I have a legitimate point of view, all of a sudden I'm a racist?
Listen, first of all, ignore the Twitter haters. Haters going to hate,
well,
right? And I get a lot of those too.
I hear you, but
anybody who's in
they're
the
not just on Twitter.
Is going to have a lot of haters.
They're not there on Twitter. It's the African American police officer who was trying to keep peace the other night. You can go on YouTube and see the vile that has been spewed towards him.
But you have to ignore that because everyone who's in the public eye. Listen, Mother Teresa had haters. Okay?
Yes.
So they're going to be out there, they're going to say nasty things, but we have to come together as a community to save lives of Americans who are being shot and killed in our streets. And I think we have to welcome and be respectful of all points of view, everybody who's trying to achieve that goal.
It's, look, if we want to have a frank and open and honest discussion about police brutality, I welcome it. I will march with these people who are championing police brutality, because clearly it is there, regardless of what happens with the Michael Brown shooting. Right? It might come back that Michael Brown did something that he probably shouldn't have been doing. Maybe he comes back. Maybe there's gun residue on his hands. Maybe there's a fingerprint somewhere. Maybe the cop's face was smashing. We don't know what happened.
Right.
But let's say it comes back where it was a justifiable shooting. That still doesn't solve the problem of police brutality.
That's correct.
Right? And police brutality is still there regardless of what happens with Michael Brown.
Well, that's correct. And I think we have to look at the structural problems, not only in the police department in Ferguson, in St. Louis, Los Angeles, Newark, all across the country. The rules that we create for police, by the way. For example, police, when they shoot, they're trained to shoot to kill. There's no shooting to disable. It's shoot to kill. If you're going to shoot, you shoot to center mass and you shoot to kill.
You think that's wrong?
Yes, I do. Because in Western European countries, for example, there are almost no police shootings. The numbers are usually 0 or 1 or 2 people killed per year in places like France, Germany, and the UK. In the US, it's about 400 per year. We can do better than that. We can disable people. We can use non-lethal force to take down people who may be dangerous, who may be perceived as a threat, without taking their very lives.
Hold on a second. This Vonderette Myers, who was shooting at the police officer, he's shooting 5 to 7 times at the police officer. If the police officer shoots his leg, he can still shoot the police officer dead.
Well, first of all, I don't think we've proven that yet. I know there was gunshot residue on him. Gunshot residue can be there from being shot at in close range or from shooting.
So you do not.
So we don't know yet.
You don't believe what came out yesterday.
I believe that there was gunshot residue found on him, as I said, from covering a lot of murder trials for a lot of years and being a practicing attorney since 1986. Gunshot residue does not establish that he was the shooter. He could have been shot at close range, and that can be the gunshot residue.
But hold on a second. Hold on. No.
Don't you want to keep an open mind on that one?
Yes, but we should also get the facts right.
Yeah.
Gunshot residue was found on one hand, much more than found on the other hand, which indicates that he shot the gun. If it was residue from the police officer's gun, they would have had equal amounts of residue on both hands.
Yeah, maybe.
Right? So
maybe.
they found a large amounts of gun residue on one hand, which insinuates he was shooting the gun.
Maybe. I want to know all the facts before I reach that conclusion, just as a jury
well,
would
what other
know.
Facts are you waiting to is there other gun residue
for example, where is
tests?
the gun? Where is the gun that he supposedly shot? I'd like to see the gun.
Oh, I don't know where the gun is.
Wouldn't you like to see the gun? If he shot a gun, where's the gun? It didn't just vaporize.
Okay,
right?
I don't think
that's one of the facts I would like to know before I reach a conclusion.
So you don't, you want to see the gun, but the gun residue doesn't matter.
Don't you think a gun is more persuasive than gun residue?
Well, where did he get the gun residue from?
As I said, that can appear on a victim when you're shot at close range.
I know. Now we're talking in circles, but the evidence.
I'm not talking in circles.
Yes, but again, the gun residue was found on one hand.
Yeah, I got that.
Which you would deduce that you shot the gun with one hand, right? If it was equal parts on both hands, you could then argue, hey, wait a minute, it was gun residue from somebody else.
I got that. That's one fact in the case.
Yes.
And you make a good case on that one fact. But
I'm not making any case. I'm just saying that's what the evidence is.
We have to have all of the facts before we reach a conclusion. That's all I'm saying. Okay.
So what about, let's go back to police brutality here for a second. There was a police officer in the Lake of the Ozarks who arrested a drunk teen on a boat, handcuffed him. This happened this summer. Handcuffed him, and then while transporting him back on a boat, put him in a life preserver. Was not put on correctly. The drunk teen, handcuffed, falls over in the boat and dies. I would say that that's police brutality in some way, right? So the the teen dies in the custody of the police.
Right.
Yeah, I'd say that's a legitimate.
Yeah. And
you would agree with that, right?
Yeah. I mean, the question is,
where's the outrage?
To what extent do we, well, there should be outrage. To what extent do we value human life in this country? Or do we consider people just to be expendable?
I agree. I agree. Where's the outrage over that?
I mean, how many of us were drunk teens at one point in our lives, right?
I agree. I'm with you.
In fact, how many of us were knuckleheaded teens who may have talked back to people when we shouldn't have, who may have been walking in the street.
But this is why,
like Mike Brown,
this is why
who may have been walking too slowly, like Trayvon Martin. I mean, all the things that people are accused of that ultimately lead to their deaths, that, many people come after them and say, well, why were they doing that? Well, didn't we do some of those things when we were teenagers?
Well, again, lots of us didn't knock over convenience stores and steal cigars, but whatever.
A lot of teenagers did shoplift.
Well, okay, and granted, just because you were shoplifting isn't justified to be shot down.
Exactly.
But again, we don't know what happened.
That's correct.
Right.
We don't.
We're
waiting.
We're waiting.
We're waiting in the Mike Brown case a very long time for a grand jury proceeding.
I don't understand.
One day a week.
Again, why is it that evidence comes out in the Vonderett Myers case and you want to wait for all the information to come out?
It's been several months since the Mike Brown shooting. In the Myers case, it's just been a very short period. I do want all of the evidence to come out.
If he's not indicted,
every case.
If he's not indicted, and the grand
You're
jury,
talking about Darren Wilson now.
Yes. If the officer is not indicted, will you accept that? Do you think that is an acceptable? Could you see how that would happen?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I do want all of the evidence to come out in that case. And since it's been a secret grand jury proceeding, we don't know what all of the evidence is, and that's part of the problem. And there should be transparency. What we do know, though, is that
we are going to get, it's all going to come out.
Eventually, yes. But if the DA if the prosecutor had chosen to charge Darren Wilson and go by way of a preliminary hearing, that would have been an open hearing that the public could have seen. It would have taken normally 1 day. So not only would it have been quicker, it would have been more transparent. Having said that, we do know some of the evidence, not all, but some of the evidence, and we know that 6 witnesses have said publicly that Mike Brown's hands were in the air at the time that he was fatally shot. 6 people.
Wait a minute. You're going to question the forensic evidence of the gun residue in one case.
I don't question it. I said it was one piece of evidence.
You want to wait for all this other information. However, you want to champion the 6 witnesses who say his hands were up?
Well, as an attorney who's been practicing law as a trial attorney since 1986, I can tell you it is very rare that you have 6 witnesses, 6 eyewitnesses, 5 of whom did not know either person in the case, to say they saw the same thing, which is that Mike Brown's hands were in the air and the universal sign of surrender at the time that he was fatally shot.
One of those
I have not heard any witnesses say otherwise.
Lisa Bloom is our guest, NBC News analyst and author. The name of your book is?
Suspicion Nation, the inside story of the Trayvon Martin injustice and why we continue to repeat it. And I'm sorry that subtitle, Why We Continue to Repeat It, has proven to be true.
It's a panel discussion on race tonight at the History Museum. What time does it start?
5:30, and it's free. You have no excuse not to come.
Are you going to stick around and continue this badgering?
I'd be very happy to.
All right, hold that thought. 9:23 here, Big 550. Right now is holding a panel discussion on race tonight at the History Museum. I will not be attending. However, you are free to attend. It is free and open to the public. She is the NBC analyst, a news analyst, and author. Her book is called Suspicion Nation, and it'll be what time tonight at the History Museum?
5:30. Everybody should come on by.
5:30. Lisa Bloom, our guest. A couple more minutes with you. One of the reasons why I think clearly both sides are not listening to each other. All sides aren't listening to each other. Everybody wants to lead. Everyone wants their voice to be heard, but nobody wants to listen to the other side. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I think is, for one of the things that I despise about this conversation, what's going on, is that we are drawn up. You are automatically. I think we seek the facts we want to seek. We seek the facts that support our opinion. Very similar to you wanting to see the gun but not accepting the fact that this residue was on the guy's hands, and it leads you to believe that he probably did shoot at the police officer.
That's not actually correct.
Well, no,
what I said was I want to hear all of the facts before I reach a conclusion. I don't know how anybody could argue with that.
But you don't. You're not that emphatic when it comes to Darren Wilson and Mike Brown.
I disagree. In the Darren Wilson case, we've had several months, and we've had 6 eyewitnesses come forward and say his hands were up at the time that he was shot. We haven't had any eyewitnesses come forward to say otherwise.
When the police are investigating a shooting, you want them to conduct that openly and not in the privacy of a private investigation? Don't you think if the evidence...
It's interesting how you keep putting words in my mouth. So I didn't say that. I think they should conduct a complete and thorough investigation, but there should also be transparency. And when the investigation is concluded...
Well, wait till the investigation is concluded.
I'm okay with that.
But you insinuated that they're taking too long, and why is this taking so long?
No, not the police, the grand jury. The grand jury going one day a week for months and months in the Darren Wilson case is ridiculous. It's a long, drawn-out, slow process.
Okay.
In that case, the prosecutor has indicated he's putting all of the evidence before the grand jury. That's highly unusual. Normally, it's a probable cause hearing where you put a couple of witnesses on, you get your probable cause finding, and then you put all of the information out at trial. This is very similar to what I wrote about in my book about what went wrong in the Trayvon Martin case, and I'm seeing signs.
What's wrong with putting all the evidence in front of the grand jury?
Because a couple of things. First of all, I don't see any evidence from this prosecutor that there's an advocate for Mike Brown in that grand jury room. It seems to me that he's hiding behind this idea of, I'm going to put everything out there. I'm going to dump all of the information on the grand jurors who are not lawyers. I'm going to leave it to them to match up. Let me finish my answer. I'm going to leave it to them to match up the facts to the charges and to come up with whatever they can come up with. That is not the normal way that grand jury proceedings go down. Normally, it is the prosecutor's job to match up the facts to the law and to come to his or her own conclusion
so you
first,
would rather
and then
have the
present it
evidence
to the
come
grand
out.
Jury.
You would rather have the evidence come out piecemeal, like it's doing in this other case.
No, I'd rather that he conduct a normal grand jury proceeding, and this is being handled very unusually. It's exactly the same way that the prosecutors in the Trayvon Martin case bungled that case. They refused to give the jury a roadmap to conviction. They refused to advocate for the victim. So there was no advocate for Trayvon Martin in that trial, and I don't see any advocate for Mike Brown in that jury room.
Okay, I don't know anything about Trayvon Martin, and we're focusing on this.
Right.
Here's one of the things that is most upsetting to most people. I think most normal people, black, white, Hispanic, young, old, Asian, St. Louis, who's watching this. And that is, it's all predicated on the color of the people's skin. If a black officer had shot a white person, there wouldn't have been outrage. If a white officer shot a white person, there wouldn't have been outrage. If a right, I mean, if a white officer shoots a black person, it's outrageous. But what's even more disturbing to me is Mike Brown. We don't have any video. We have lots of video around it, but we don't have that video of the actual shooting.
Because the police didn't have cameras. They didn't have badge cams or dashboard cams, as they should. Can't we all agree that they should have that? It would protect innocent cops.
Well, actually, a dash cam wouldn't have solved anything because this happened to the side.
Right. It should be a badge cam. In other words, on the badge or on the police officer's collar.
How would you like to pay for that? Do you think the police should write more tickets?
Well, in Rialto, California, this is a very effective... I'll tell you how you pay for it. Yeah. You have significantly less liability that the city has to pay after these shootings. So in the Rialto, California case, where they've had them in a pilot project, 80% reduction in lawsuits against the police department.
I think the police would and have welcomed all of these cameras.
Well, let's get on with it.
We don't have any video of that. We don't have any video of this Shaw neighborhood shooting. But we do have video of the police officer who shot the man who was this knife-wielding man who shot just a few miles away from Ferguson during that whole criticism. Right. How come that isn't front and center? How come people aren't protesting over that?
You're talking about the mentally ill man who was saying, kill me now? Yeah. Yes, I've watched that video, and I'm very concerned because what the police said initially was that he had his hands up overhand and he was charging them with the knife. When you look at the video, that's absolutely not true.
Where's the outrage about that? Well, how come
I think that is outrageous.
How come that man's life doesn't matter?
It does matter, and there has been a lot of outrage from the community.
Oh, there certainly has not been a lot of outrage.
Well, if you look at my Twitter feed, I expressed a lot of outrage about that.
What's the name of that man?
What's the name of the man who I don't recall off the top of my head?
I don't know either. But we do know Michael Brown and we do know Von Rittmeyer. So how much outrage can it be if we don't even know the man's name?
McGraw, can I respond to the point you made about black and white? Because I think you're saying something that a lot of people feel. And there's something that we need to understand, which is there was a study that just came out that about every 28 hours in America, an unarmed African American is shot and killed either by a police
That is
officer
not true.
or a vigilante.
It's not true.
Well,
The
there
man
was
who
a study who came out.
who said that said it's not true, and he was misquoted. He said it on CNN,
Oh,
and
I
he
haven't
came back
seen
and he
that.
said that he misquoted and
Well,
didn't. He was that's
No,
a
you're
flat
talking
out.
about Mark Lamont Hill, and that's not correct what you're saying. What Mark Lamont Hill said was that it was a correct statement. I think he slightly misquoted it, but I've read the study itself, and the study remains valid. My bigger point is that I think we who are not African American, I'm a white girl, you're a white guy, we have to be sensitive to the concerns that African Americans are trying to raise and not just brush it aside and say, oh, they're just playing the race card. We have a particular problem in America with a highly disproportionate number of African Americans being shot and killed. You know, I'm a civil rights activist for all people, gay, straight, women, men, black, white. But we're talking life and death when we're talking about this issue. We're talking about mothers grieving over their 18-year-old sons being shot. And race does play a part in it, whether we would like it to or not. Of course, we'd like to live in a post-racial world, but that's just not the case. And there's a lot of studies that I quote in my book where people come to these negative conclusions about African Americans that are completely unjustified. Many of us walk around with implicit racial bias that we're not even aware of.
I agree with that.
But there are very sophisticated psychological tests that show that we are walking around. So we got to get rid of that.
I agree with that.
I'm glad we have a point where we can
I agree with that. I also agree that there's massive amounts of sheer flat-out racism in the African American community.
Well,
You don't think so?
Against who?
Against whites. Did you ever talk to a fan?
Okay, but do you
Hold on a
worry
sec.
walking down the street that you're going to get shot by a police officer? I don't. I didn't have to teach my children, you know, how fast to walk, where to put their hands when the police officer approaches them.
How come it's only
very
only
different
black
conversation.
men? How come black women aren't petrified?
Well, many of them are actually. I don't want to discount that. Look
Well,
at
but
Renisha
many of them
McBride.
aren't.
Look at the Renisha McBride shooting.
How come police officers don't shoot black women in the same numbers they shoot black men?
Well, there are a lot of studies about the implicit racial biases that we have against African Americans. There is highly disproportionate policing in black communities. So, for example, whites and blacks use marijuana at about the same rates, but blacks are 4 times as likely to be arrested.
I agree with you.
For marijuana
I
crimes,
agree with you.
right?
And the whole cocaine versus crack.
Right.
And
so
I
that's
agree
across
with you.
the board.
And there are
Listen,
many people who
what was
agree with you on
Mike
that.
Brown
And let's
initially stopped for? Jaywalking, walking in the street. That's something I do almost every day because
You walk down the middle of
in
the
my
street?
community in Los Angeles, the sidewalks are terrible, and I'm a runner, so I run in the street. No police
You
officer.
run in the middle of the street?
On the side of the street.
Well, it sounded like
And
he
if
was
there's
walking in the middle of the street.
Well, okay, but no police officer has ever stopped me for doing that, and I don't think any police officer ever will. And that's the difference between somebody like Mike Brown and me. I don't get hassled for petty things like walking in the wrong place, walking too fast. People don't suspect that I'm a burglar.
I agree with you. But you know what? In Beverly Hills, in Uplands Park, in Calverton Park, in Charlotte, in Edmondson, in Hilldale, in Velda City, all run by African Americans, all writing exorbitant number of tickets towards African Americans.
Well, we got to get rid of the tickets. That's something you and I agree on again, right?
But again, these aren't white cops and white police officers and white management doing this to black people.
Yeah.
This is their own people doing it to their own people.
I hear you on that.
And so where's the outrage there? Where's the outrage?
I'm outraged about the tickets.
Where's the outrage when a young man, African American, who wants to grow up to be a police officer, and he's told, guess what? You're a sellout. You're an Uncle Tom. How dare you sell out to Whitey? Right? What about when Condoleezza Rice and Colin Powell are sitting in the office, in the highest office in the land, and Harry Belafonte calls him a house Negro? How offensive is that? Where is that? When a black kid brings home a white girl and he's ostracized by his own community, how dare you bring home a white girl?
You know,
where's that outrage?
I think we have to be sensitive to the African American community and not just, slap them across the face with things that maybe we don't have a deep understanding of.
Oh, so we have to understand the racism towards the white girl who brings home a black man. But
first of all, I think
but
that's
if I were to bring home a
minority.
black, oh no, it's not.
Well,
it's not. I don't know the numbers,
I'm
but it's out there.
I'm a white woman, and I speak often in black bookstores, black churches across this country, and I'm very warmly received.
I didn't tell you. Okay,
so
that's fine.
I don't think it's equivalent. There's always going to be people in any community who say ridiculous things, who are obnoxious, who are racist, but that doesn't negate the problem that we're talking about of implicit racial bias and the deaths of African Americans unarmed in our streets every day, and the solutions that we can have to that.
No question about it. But you know what? When Don Imus says nappy-headed hoe and is ostracized and loses his job, rightfully so, for saying something racially insensitive and wrong and should be called on the carpet.
Yeah, I think it's different when you're talking about your own community. So I'm Jewish.
No, hold on a second.
I make comments about my community, but I don't want you to do it.
Oh, so it's okay for an African American in a song to say the word nigger, but it's wrong for a white person to say it.
Yeah, because I think there's a long history of that word being highly offensive and racially charged.
So can
I finish my answer?
Go ahead.
And there's a movement by the community to take the sting out of that word. Now, I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong. It's like the word bitch, if I can say that on your air, right? A lot of women might use hey, bitch, all right? But if a man says that, it has a different meaning. And there's a deeper context to a lot of it.
What about a black man calling a black police officer a black bitch for being a police officer in a white man's world?
Probably not cool.
Not cool.
Not cool.
Not
cool. However, a lot of stupid things.
There are video on top of video on top of video of these protesters who people are championing saying that exact same thing.
Well, listen, I take my hat off to the peaceful protesters who have raised these issues nationwide.
You take your hat off to the police officers who have kept the peace?
Yes, I do. Absolutely.
Who haven't shot?
Especially Ron Johnson. And I've spoken in Los Angeles at a rally against police abuse and said I wanted to thank the police officers who were there that day, who were peacefully assisting us in the protest. There are good people on both sides.
What about Chief Belmar, who was in charge the first couple of days before Chief Johnson got involved?
Is anyone going to defend that conduct with the tanks in the street and the snipers pointed at peaceful protesters? Are you going to defend that? Is anyone going to defend that?
Yeah, I am going to defend
that.
Really?
We're going to does anyone who knows anything about guns think that you should point a loaded gun at someone if you don't intend to shoot it? Basic gun safety is you do not point a gun at a peaceful protester. How many gunshots
have the police, since the Michael Brown shooting, fired during all these protests?
You're changing the subject because you don't want to address the issue of the police who we give a gun and a badge training a loaded gun at peaceful protesters. That is completely intolerable.
Is it acceptable for the protesters?
You're changing the subject.
No. First of all, the guns were loaded with pepper bullets.
You'd never point a loaded gun at someone unless you intend to shoot it. Guns should always be pointed down.
How many shots have the police fired?
You're not going to answer my question.
How many shots have they fired? How many people have fired at the police officers?
Of course, nobody should be firing at anyone. And I salute the peaceful protesters.
Have been zero.
The vast majority of the protests have been peaceful.
There have been 0 gunshots fired at protesters.
Thank goodness.
There have been thousands of gunshots fired at the police.
I don't know about thousands, but okay.
There is video evidence of this.
Of thousands of gunshots? You're not overstating that a little?
No, I am not overstating that at all. Feces, urine, Molotov cocktails.
This is a tiny minority of the protesters.
But these are the
Why
protests.
Why don't you want to talk about the clergy who have linked arms and who have protested? Why don't you want to talk about the peaceful people who are taking to the streets to raise a legitimate issue in the long tradition of American history, of Martin Luther King, of the women's suffrage movement, of peace movements,
do you know
who
why
brought
I don't?
about such important change in America over the years?
Do you know why I don't? It's
talk about the majority, not the minority.
Well, first of all, because I don't know what they want. I don't believe their message. I don't believe they're pure. I don't believe they would fight for a white man who was roughed up by a police officer, or a black woman for that matter.
Well, here's the thing,
Stephen A. Smith, a black sports commentator on ESPN, when Ray Rice's girlfriend was thrown from the elevator, this man said, "I tell my women, don't give men a reason to beat you."
Well, what does that have to do with the Ferguson protests?
Where's the outrage?
I expressed outrage about that. I was talking about that case a lot on CNN, on MSNBC.
No.
But what
the
does
protesters,
one case have to do with another?
Well, first of all,
McGraw,
if Black Lives Matter, then they all matter.
Of course. But again, you're trying to take one ridiculous example.
That's not
to
a ridiculous
undercut
example
peaceful
of beating a
people,
woman
including
senseless.
Clergy
What about
in the
Lakeisha
streets.
Williams, the 13-year-old girl who was shot in the eye in a drug deal
Horrible.
gone bad? Where's the outrage there?
Horrible. But listen, we can only talk about one issue at a time. It's like
No,
saying to
no, no.
somebody, listen to me, it's like saying to somebody who's fighting cancer, why aren't you fighting AIDS? There are a lot of legitimate issues in our culture, and the police shootings of unarmed civilians is one of them.
First of all, okay, I agree with you.
Okay.
I agree with you.
Great.
Let's find out. And if it comes back that Officer Wilson was unjustified in this shooting, I think the majority of St. Louisans will say, absolutely, this man needs to be brought to justice.
Right.
However, if he's not, and the evidence shows that it was somehow justified, Jamela Nasheed says, if you do not indict this officer, the rioting we witnessed this past week will seem like a picnic compared to the havoc that will likely occur. Mm-hmm. Does that woman actually believe in the facts?
Yeah, I don't know her, so I can't
She's
speak
an
to that.
elected official.
Okay, but let me answer that.
Yes.
As I said, there are 6 people who have come forward who said that Mike Brown was shot with his arms up in the air in
Yes.
the universal sign of surrender.
Yes.
What is the evidence that is going to counteract that? It might be there.
As a lawyer,
but
you
so
know,
far, I don't know what it
eyewitnesses.
is.
You know, eyewitnesses
6?
never exaggerate.
6? Listen, I have a civil rights case I'm taking to trial in Los Angeles in a couple weeks. I wish I had 6 witnesses. I have a couple of witnesses. 6 witnesses
So
is
6
highly
witnesses
unusual.
automatically means
a
you're
couple
guilty?
of them are 6 witnesses is very powerful evidence of probable cause,
What
and that's
about,
all
what
the grand
about
jury
the actual,
has to decide at this point.
What about how actually accurate they are?
Okay.
Or how real they are.
Listen,
just
it
because
is possible
just
that
because you
6
have
witnesses can be undermined, but it's not probable.
You sound like the commentators on MSNBC who say, in Ferguson, 6 of the 7 aldermen are white. So what? What does that mean?
Well, I don't. First of all, I do appear frequently on MSNBC.
I
think
don't,
that
oddly
is
enough.
Well, I'd love to have you on.
Hey,
We
I'd
can
love to
discuss
talk
those
on
issues without interrupting
MSNBC.
each
They
other.
don't really like to invite me on.
You know, I think we do have issues about diversity in our communities among the aldermen. I think we have issues about diversity in the police force. I think every police force in America should roughly reflect the diversity of the community. I think that would undercut a lot of these problems. I think diversity is a good thing, and we should have
Republican
representatives of all races.
Absolutely.
in authority.
The Republican mayor of Ferguson ran unopposed.
Right.
Yes, the white man.
And you know, one of the
unopposed.
great things that's happened with these protests is voter registration drives. And
Is up 132 people in Ferguson.
Well, you know, everybody needs to register to vote. And there's no
I agree with
excuse
that, too.
Not to vote. And I give a long speech to people about how your ancestors fought and died for your right to vote. You better get your butt out there and vote.
Lisa
and I
Bloom.
think people are waking up to that.
One more time, the name of your book.
Suspicion Nation, the inside story of the Trayvon Martin injustice and why we continue to repeat it.
You will be holding a panel, a discussion on race tonight at the History Museum, 5:30 the start time.
And it's free, and I hope everybody will come by.
And your group that's bringing you in is Meet Me St. Louis. Do you guys have a website? Meet Me, Facebook.com/MeetMeSt.
StLouis.org. And it's a wonderful organization bringing speakers and artists to the community, and everybody should come.
Lisa Bloom, I'd love to take up your offer on MSNBC and to get
All
some
right.
producers to give me a call.
We'll do it.
Good luck and have a safe time tonight.
Thanks for having me.